the Kedusha of the Mikdash in Yerushalayim is derived from the divine presence, and that's something that cannot be eradicated. It says, I will lay waste your sanctuary. Even though they were laid waste, they are still sanctified. Aval chiyuv haaretz b'shvi'it u'b'masrot eno el mipnei shehu kibush rabim. The sanctity of Eretz Yisrael for the kedusha of the 7th year and the kedusha of Masrot is only because it was conquered. V'kevan shenilkecha haaretz miyidehem batel hakibush v'niftara min haTorah miMa'asrot u'mishvi'it sheira eina shaharei eina min Eretz Yisrael. This is a very, very sharp statement. He says the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael is derived from conquest. And conquest can be undone. And therefore today, in his day, right, the fact that Goyim conquered Eretz Yisrael, he says, V'harei eina min Eretz Yisrael. It's not Eretz Yisrael anymore. Okay? The simple meaning of Eretz Yisrael is Eretz Shel Yisrael, right? How would you translate it? Not the land of Israel, the way it's thrown around, but the land that belongs to the Jewish people, the land of Israel, the land that belongs to the children of Israel. When the Babylonians occupy it, or the Romans occupy it, or the Muslims occupy it, so it's not the land that belongs to the children of Israel anymore. Harei eino min Yisrael, min Eretz Yisrael. Okay? So therefore it loses its kedusha because it's derived again from political conquest. Okay? And political conquest can be undone. Okay? Now, if that's the case, why is the Kedusha of Ezra permanent? Right? The Kevan Shala Ezra, I'm still in that same halacha. The Kevan Shala Ezra, the Kidsha, Lo Kidsha Bekibush, Ela Bechazaka Shechziku Ba. Ezra didn't come to Eretz Yisrael with armies, and he didn't conquer and impose Jewish sovereignty upon the land, upon the inhabitants of the land. Ela b'chazaka shechziku ba. They took possession without sovereignty, without conquest. Ulefichach kol makom shechziku ba olei Bavel v'nitkadesh b'kedushat Ezra Shniya hu mikudash hayom. Therefore, any area that was settled in the time of Ezra, that is holy today. And even though the land was taken away from us, and it's chayav in the mitzvot hatluyot ba'aretz, as he explains in the laws of Truma. Okay. What?
I'm sorry. He claims that since the time of Ezra, the land. He said that the status of the land is not kedusha, correct?
After the Babylonians conquered the land, it became, in his language, Eina min Eretz Yisrael. It's not Eretz Yisrael anymore. Okay? And Ezra did not conquer it. Settled it. It re-established the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael. And that Kedusha, Shniya, the second Kedusha of Ezra, is not negatable. Even though, subsequent to that, the land was conquered again and taken away from us, since the creation of the Kedusha was not through conquest, but rather through settlement, that Kedusha, that sanctity is permanent.
And though we're not there, that Kedusha is
right, so that Kedusha remains. Right, so what's bothering you is basically what the Kesef Mishnah asks.
What's the difference between when the Babylon is there and then when after Ezra, when we still don't have the land?
Right, because even if you say that the conquest was undone by the Babylonians, and there was no conquest to become undone in the time of Ezra, but there was settlement to become undone, right? That's what he asks, right? 1 second. I'll just show that to you.
Yeah, I guess also the nafkamina between kiddush and ha'asaka.
Yeah, that's what he's talking about. So here, let me just find it. Right, so he says, this is the Kesef Mishnah in the end of Perek Vav in Hilchot Beit HaBechira. So he says, Eni yodea ma koach chazakah gadol mikoach kibush. I don't know why chazakah is more potent than conquest, than kibush. V'lama lo neomar b'chazakah gam kein mi shenilkecha haaretz miyadenu batla chazakah. Why don't we say b'chazakah also? Say, if it was conquered, so then the conquest is undone. If it was settled, then the settlement became undone. Right? Why don't you say that? Okay?
Permanence to settlement than to conquest.
What?
There's more permanence to settlement than to conquest.
Not really. The Jews were thrown out. Physically, they were thrown out.
Kedusha.
Right, so the question is why? Okay, that's what the Rambam says, but he's saying he doesn't understand why that should be. Okay. So we have to understand that there are two ways of creating Kedusha. And I've talked about this in the past. There are many different ways of discussing it. Conquest is imposing sovereignty from the outside. It's from the top down. Chazakah is grassroots. It's from the bottom up. It was human activity that created facts on the ground. Now, both of those things on the level of what you see right now can become undone. You can change sovereignty, and you can also throw people, you can exile people, and then you've undone, it seems, the settlement as well. Okay? But in the nature of the Kedusha that is created as a consequence of those two processes, the Kedusha is totally different. The Kedusha, which is created from the top down, right, the imposition of sovereignty, is significant as long as the sovereignty is there. In a sense, you're forcing a certain reality. When that reality changes, then there is no more Kedusha. Okay? It would be analogous to, does anybody really know where Har Sinai is? Does anybody really care? If you're a historian, maybe you care. But we don't seek out Har Sinai as a place to, as a place of pilgrimage, and we don't build monasteries on Har Sinai, even if we knew where it was, because Har Sinai was a makom mikudash. It was a holy place as long as God dwelled there, so to speak. Right? The moment God didn't dwell there anymore, so Har Sinai just became it sort of slipped back into the anonymity of the mountains of the Sinai Peninsula. Right? That lost its religious significance. It might have historical significance and be an object of our curiosity, but religiously it has no significance anymore. Okay? Because the Kedusha there came from on high, and it was significant as long as it was there. So sovereignty is like that. As long as it's there, it's there. When it's not there, it's not there. And even if you're talking about kibush and sovereignty, you can translate this into real politics in the sense, as long as a country is held together, think of the former Soviet Union, right? As long as a country is held together from the top down, by terror, right? As long as it's held together, it's held together. But the moment the authority disintegrates, the country disintegrates. There's nothing really holding it together except the army and the secret police. Okay? So that's analogous to sovereignty, to kibush. And that, when you wipe out the kibush, when you change the sovereignty, so the Kedusha is gone. Right? Chazakah is different. Right? Chazakah is the creation of Kedusha through grassroots change. So there, the creation of the Kedusha is not imposed from the outside, but is a function of some sort of internal transformation. And even if the outer expressions of what created that Kedusha, namely people living there, have disappeared, but through their activity of toiling in the land and settling it, they transform the land into a Makom Kadosh. That cannot be negated. Okay? So there are two different types of Kedusha. So that's why, that's how we answer the question of the Kesef Mishnah. So Kesef Mishnah is just looking at it externally. You create Kedusha this way, you create Kedusha that way. If you can take it away here, why can't you take it away there? Because the type of Kedusha that was created was different. One was imposed from the outside, and one was the product of a transformation from the inside. Okay? So that's as far as the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael. Now there's another aspect of this we have to explore. And that is, if we take a look, turn on the other side of the page. Okay, in the middle of the page you have the Rambam in Hilchot Shumot. Okay? Hilchot Shumot Perek Aleph. So the Rambam says, Kol shechziku olei Mitzrayim, any area which the Jews who came out of Egypt attained, v'nit kadesh kedusha rishona, and it acquired the first sanctity from the time of Yehoshua. Kevan shigalu, once they were exiled, batlu kedushatan, right? So the kedusha was negated. Okay, he's consistent with what he said. Shekedusha rishona lefi shatam mipnei hakibush bilvad, since the first sanctification, since it was only as a consequence of conquest, kitchal shata v'lo kitchalati lavo, so it's temporary. Kevan shalu b'nei hagola v'hichziku b'miktzat haaretz, since those who came from Bavel later, hundreds and hundreds of years later, and they took possession of part of the land, Kitshua Kedusha Shniyah, so they sanctified it again, a second time, Ha'omedet le'olam, and that's permanent, L'sha'ata v'la'atid lavo, for its time and for future time. Okay? V'hinichu otam mekomot. Okay, so let's get into a specific halacha that's connected to Trumot. Okay, the Rambam draws a distinction between, now for the first time, two different geographical areas. There's the area of Olei Mitzrayim, which is greater, which those that came out of Egypt took, and then when we came back with Ezra, so we didn't take possession of that entire area. We took possession of an area within that larger area, right? So that one area is called Olei Mitzrayim, and the other more restricted area is called Olei Bavel. Okay? So today, the only place that has sanctity is Olei Bavel, and not Olei Mitzrayim, which is why, for instance, fruits that come from the southern Arava are not chayavim in Trumot u'Ma'asrot, because even though we might have had possession of those areas when we came out of Egypt, but we certainly didn't have possession of those areas from the time of Ezra. Okay? Okay. But take a look now in the next Rambam. Okay. The Rambam here says, Ein somchin, the Rambam in Hilchot Sanhedrin, Perek Dalet, Halacha Vav. Ein somchim zkenim b'chutz la'aretz. Okay, so there's a halacha called of smichat zkenim. When you give smicha, right? Not smicha that we do today, right? But smicha which goes from the